Welcome to the Clean Library Podcast, where content meets conscience. We believe there are millions of you readers out there desperately searching for a better way to find clean content. Each episode, we will introduce you to a new author of clean books, giving you, your family, and your friends clean options.
Hello, my name is Marcus Williams, and I'm here with co-host Brock Morris, and today we have special guest Xina Marie Ewell. Xina was born and raised in Arizona and took a 20-year detour to Southern California before returning. A fan of history from her grade school days, she obtained a master's degree in history with a focus on the ancient Mediterranean. She went on to become a novelist and writer of more than 30 nonfiction books for young people. Currently, she teaches history at San Carlos Apache College in eastern Arizona. Her fiction spans genres including fantasy, adventure, and romance, and locations such as the Roman Empire, Antarctica, and the American West. Her novel City of the Dead is a fantasy greatly influenced by ancient history, and her most recent work, published on Amazon's Vela platform, Blue Moon Rising, weaves the tale of Navajo skinwalkers and centuries-old trauma into a modern-day fantasy. Welcome, Xina. We're so happy to have you on the show with us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
Absolutely. So before we jump into getting to know you, we're going to read your two truths and a lie and introduce you to
Okay.
Steve. He's our scorekeeper for our little game here. So we can keep track of how far behind I am all the time.
You'll get there, Marcus. It's all right. Yeah.
All right. So here we go. Number one, I once walked an ancient pilgrimage route for 500 kilometers. Number two, I have 7 children and 1 grandchild. And number 3, my dream has been to have 2 wild donkeys as pets. So ancient pilgrimage for 500 kilometers, 7 children and 1 grandchild, or a dream to have 2 wild donkeys. So we'll see if we can weave donkeys into the conversation here. Figure it out.
Well, that would be easy to do, actually, because donkeys, when prospectors were coming west and looking for gold or silver or whatever they could, they had their little burros, donkeys with them. But then when they wanted to leave, what are they going to do? So they just kind of turned them loose into the desert. And so out in Arizona and Nevada, in certain areas of the West, there's herds of wild burros out there, kind of living their best life, except that the landscape doesn't really support them. And so the government then has to keep them from starving and from destroying the land. So they round them up and they sell them to people, or nearby where I live in eastern Arizona, they give some to some convicts to train. So it's kind of a way for them to get some skills and maybe learn more patience and stuff. Because donkeys are very different. They're supposedly stubborn, but really they're just cautious. And they think they want to know, should I do this or not? And so we have to
Just
convince
cautious.
them.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
That's cool. So for you've written nonfiction and fiction. And how did you, with your love of history and everything, how did you get into writing?
Well, writing has been something that I've pretty much always done since I was, 12 or so. And of course, I was a big reader. I still am a big reader. And it just kind of came naturally to write. And I found over my life that I kind of seesaw back and forth between history I'm a professor of history. So there's that, the academic side, the research, all that. and then just pure creativity and writing. And so sometimes the two merge, and
Hmm.
they've done that when I have worked on a lot of nonfiction books for young people. I was a freelance writer for about 15 years. And so when you were growing up in your classroom, they probably had like a little library of some books, to do reports or what have you. And
Yeah.
so I wrote some of those books that were in your little classroom library. um, but unfortunately, as time has progressed and the internet is, more everywhere, the market for those has kind of declined. So I had to move on to
Yeah.
something else. Yeah.
Yeah. So, are the nonfiction books, are those about history, or is it a variety of topics?
It's a variety of topics. I mean, history is my specialty, so
Hmm.
that those were always my favorite, and I have more history. But basically, I worked with some publishers, and they would contact me and say, "Hey, we need a book on, I don't know, a biography of Tom Brady, or
Hmm.
the conquistadors. We need to do that, or let's see maybe something else
Yeah.
that wasn't necessarily history." And so I would say, sure. And I would follow the guidelines, just write the book. And the kind of the nice thing about that as a writer is that I didn't have to worry about publishing it, because I was already contracted to publish it. And so I didn't have to
Yeah.
worry about selling them or whatnot. That's what the publisher did. And so it was really a lot of fun. I also did a lot of editing and everything during that time. I worked as a kind of a project manager, getting these, going through the publication process, getting these titles out. And so, it was great. I loved doing it.
So, how did that morph into the fiction writing?
Well, fiction writing has always kind of been something that I did along with whatever I'm doing for money, basically.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So whatever job I had, and I've had a lot of different work. And then I would just be working on whatever project, and I kind of go back and forth between genres too, because I like romance, and that's where most of my sweet books, clean books, are romance, kind of humorous, lighthearted types of romance stories. And then I've done some fantasy, and some of that is more lighthearted, but that's kind of, some of it is also darker. So if you prefer to read completely clean, then you would want to go more toward my romance. But as I'm sure you are aware, there's a lot of bad things that happen in history. Um,
Yeah.
we're human beings. We can be wonderful, but we can be terrible too.
Yes.
And so, particularly, like I've been writing about the Navajo in
Hmm.
the 1860s, and during that period of time, not just the Navajo, but many Native American tribes were treated pretty poorly
Yeah.
by the U.S. because of course, you don't treat somebody nice if you treat somebody nice, you're not going to come in and take their land. And so that's
Right.
just kind of the way it went. And so I kind of melded that with some fantasy, and that's one of my latest projects. So yeah, it's
Interesting.
kind of, yeah, and as an independent author, uh, I can do that, kind of do genre jumping, and if I had a contract with a major publisher and they always want you to stay in your lane, basically,
Yeah,
stay and only do this. But now I can kind of let my, imagination go.
sure.
So, yeah.
So was that always your plan, was to be an independent author, or was there a time when you wanted to go with a traditional publisher? How did that all flesh
Yeah, I
out?
mean, uh, a plan. I haven't really had much of a plan, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
I just want to live a full, blessed life, I guess you would say. So yeah, I have tried over the years to publish with fiction publishers, and for one reason or another, it didn't work out. Most of the time, I was rejected. But even sometimes when I was offered contracts, I didn't like the way I just didn't care for what was being asked of me, and so you
Yeah.
lose that freedom when somebody's going to pay you for your work. You have to make them happy, and um, so instead, what I've tried to do is, over the years, as technology has progressed and has offered us all these wonderful opportunities to have podcasts, to publish, whatever we want, much easier than in the past. I've tried to kind of carve out my own little independent niche. So I hope
Yeah.
that answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So with and we find that with a lot of independent authors that we talk to, they like spanning different genres and expanding those categories and not being, like, constrained. So I wonder
And
how does that work for you when you're trying to find your readers, your audience, in different genres? You find that a challenge, or is people like that?
yeah, it is a bit of a challenge because we're so kind of trained as consumers to, to want certain things. Like particularly in romance, there's a lot of readers who like certain tropes. Tropes like billionaire, billionaire man meets, secretary or whatever, and so they get together.
Yeah.
Or what are other tropes? Second chance at love. Maybe
Yeah.
somebody who has been, maybe their husband or whatever has passed or divorced or whatever, and so there's different tropes that particularly romance readers look for. So it can be a challenge just because, like Amazon is the marketplace for most independent writers. But there's
Yeah.
so much out there. So, so you have to not only be creative, but you have to have like a kind of a business hat or marketing, um, which, we all have busy lives. And so some people are better at that than others. So
Right.
it's a challenge. It's a challenge for me, always to do that, but it's something that I continually come back to, just because it's in my nature, in my heart, and I'm so happy and lucky to be able to do what I do.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. So when you was there a time when you're kind of deciding what to write and how to write, that you made a conscious decision to keep those, especially the romances, clean, or was that just a natural thing for you, or how did you make that decision? Because the marketplace is so saturated with
Yeah.
spicy or mature or whatever.
Right, right. Um, I didn't really make a conscious decision. It's just what I'm good at and what I like.
Hmm.
I'm not like a real spicy, writer who wants to write about people being in bed for days on end and stuff. Sure,
Yeah.
that's part of love and marriage, but it's just not something that I'm good at, or really, frankly. interested in. And so I
Uh-huh.
prefer more lighthearted, more humor. Maybe quirky is a good way to describe a lot of my romances. And so if I like it, if it's funny, if my writing group is cracking up and other readers say I laughed and this is hilarious, then I think I'm on the right track with that. But as far as being really great at at marketing and stuff, I could be a lot better. But again, it's life is a balance. You have to
Right.
balance what you're good at, what you enjoy, what needs to be done, and you know, just how to take care of your pets, how to take care of your family, that whole thing.
Right. Absolutely. Um, I loved your comment about history not being, I guess, clean. There's good and bad in history, and humans are good and bad. So, how do you approach when you're writing, when you're including historical, whether in your fantasies or whatever? Um,
Yeah.
how do you include the bad things um, in a way that keeps people interested, but maybe doesn't go down that really dark hole?
Right. And it can get very dark. Yes, it can. Um, well, I love research. And
Hmm.
in history, primary sources, which are mainly written accounts from somebody who went through a certain situation, like maybe they were there at Ford's Theater when Lincoln got shot, and then they wrote a letter to their cousin about everything that happened,
Yeah.
um, or maybe a photograph of somebody. These are primary sources, and speeches, things like that. And so they are fascinating to dig into because they really open the door on people from another time and their personal experience. Uh, and so that is what I try to focus on, people's personal experience. As a professor, I'm going to get more into the background, the overall, what's going on in history, context, and all that. But as a fiction writer, for me, it's about characters, about people, their experiences. And as you weave that into a story, it can be more lighthearted, or it can be a bit more difficult to deal with, or I guess you would say, challenging, darker, or so forth. So I
Yeah.
guess it kind of depends on the nature of the project, and just kind of naturally, romance for me has been a bit more lighthearted. So
Yeah.
I just kind of take it as kind of a whole feel when I approach a project. And so for the lighthearted ones, I'm not going to have like some massacre of of people or whatever, because yeah, it
Right.
might have happened, but that's not appropriate for this story or these characters.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm interested in this concept of of being a professor, and I wonder how much, if you can share, how much of that might relate to your ability to, present a story, right, that still validates what happened in real life, but obviously you can also only be so graphic as a professor, right? So even though real life is dark and real life is not always clean, you have to present it to a way, I assume, to your students in a way that keeps them engaged and gets the story across, that doesn't invalidate what really happened, but obviously has to remain somewhat, clean, for lack of a better term, right? And do you feel like, am I accurate in what I'm saying here? And does that translate into the way that you write, or you've been able to write and be successful at keeping stories relatively clean, and still describing the nature and validity of,
Right.
of what occurred?
Yeah. Um, it, I find that a lot of what I do with fiction, with nonfiction, and with teaching is translate what has happened into a way that people can comprehend it, that they can understand it and gain something from it, whether it's like emotional satisfaction or enjoyment in fiction, or of course many people enjoy history, but then there's more of an intellectual bent about kind of understanding these big waves or currents in history. So I'm new at teaching Apache history. I work for a tribal college on the San Carlos Apache reservation. And so that has been challenging to present what happened and be truthful, but not make it seem, not demoralize students, I guess you would say. Because depending on your own outlook, your own bias as an instructor, you can kind of skew things one way or the other. And that is probably, within the news and with politics and all this, you can kind of see that play out across the US. So it's a challenge. I mean, it's a real challenge. But being educated is worth the pain that comes with knowledge, I think. I've had a particular student who came into my class angry about the past, about his things his family went through. Now, being somebody who studied ancient Mediterranean, that's not something that I was used to. It's like, oh, these are people today who are profoundly affected by things, and so it makes it more upfront and personal. And so I guess it just has to do with being aware, being thoughtful about what you're trying to help the student, what you're trying to educate them to do. So it's more than just knowledge. It's also about things like critical thinking, about examining bias, viewpoints, and things like that. So, you're teaching skills, and information is part of that. But I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's a balance. You have to be careful and thoughtful, and that's what I try real hard to do.
Yeah, and I think the way we've looked at and studied history has kind of changed and morphed a little bit over recent years. And, like, it happened, we can't change what happened, but we can learn from it. We can try to put ourselves in their shoes at the time, but also look at it from our perspective. I mean, so I love that, and the care and just thoughtfulness that you're putting into your teaching and instruction. I think that's something I wish all history teachers would focus on and try to do. So,
a lot of history, if you read it or listen to it, people say, oh, it's so dull or whatever. Well, to me, it's so fascinating. It's a story of human beings. What could be more fascinating than that? Cultures, societies, and how human beings deal with different things. But one thing to always remember about history is that we can never truly be objective, because we have our own biases and things that have happened in our life, things we take for granted, that in other time periods they didn't have. And how can we divorce ourselves from that to be
Right.
accurate? So it's like in 100 years, people may say, can you believe they did that in 2024? Can you believe they acted this way, or they thought this? Well, of course, of course they have their own things, but
Right.
there's a blind side that we just can't see because of our present, um, experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to dive into, like, maybe do family history or genealogy to look at to try to understand why you're where you're at right now and learn from that,
Yeah.
and be grateful for the things that people went through before so that you could be where you are today.
Right, and also try to be open to your own narrative. We all have this narrative, in where we're the star in our own show, and our family and all that.
Right.
Well, other people have different experiences, and so try to be open to that as well. It's not always
Yeah.
easy to do
Love that.
because sometimes people are raised completely differently in different places, different family, different ethnic group, or what have you. So
Yeah. Yeah. So if someone is first hearing about your books today, do you have a recommendation of which books they should start with, or
yeah.
where they should go
um,
first?
well, I do have a recommendation. If you prefer romance and like quirky romance, I have a couple of shorter stories that are set in Antarctica. They're very quirky, they're lighthearted. They are on Amazon, but also they are on Audible, so there's audiobook format too.
Hmm.
Um, and they are just a good introduction to history through my mind, and I think they're enjoyable, and they have great characters, and so that would probably be a good introduction. And then if you want to look at other things, I have of course like I have a cat book. It's a humorous kind of a gift book. It's very small. It's called The Cat's Guide to Human Behavior. And it's narrated by Professor Kitty. So there's kind of a range of what I have available. So
Yeah.
and then if fantasy is more your thing, then I have that as well too. So um, I'm working on my website right now, and but I'm on Amazon. I have a very distinctive name, so just put that on and put that in there and see what
Yeah.
comes up, I guess.
Yeah. Awesome. So, what was your experience like with creating the audiobooks?
Oh, it was really fun, but it's a lot of work. I got to give you guys credit. It takes a lot of time. I've narrated some of my own stories, but of course, I'm not a professional, and um, yeah, I don't know. I just, for my Antarctica books, I wanted to get a professional actress because it's a very quirky, humorous story. And
Yeah.
the woman that I found to narrate them, she has a wonderful way of expressing herself that is kind of not like everybody else, but it serves the stories really well. So, so it it's a great experience. I enjoyed it. I wish I could have everything that I write in audio format, but it's a lot more challenging than just writing. You have to take the time to record it and edit it, and all that you have to do. So I have great respect for podcasters, for anybody involved in that, because I've had a little bit of experience with it.
Yeah. So, and it's a cool feeling to hear your book. It's very,
Yeah,
very different from reading it. Like when you hear it come alive, um,
yeah.
especially when it's someone else who who narrates it for you. It's,
Right,
I don't know.
right.
It's hard to explain, but it's a very cool feeling for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, I really think it uses a different part of the brain when you listen to something as opposed to writing it, because or reading it. I've found that I retain different information from one format or the other, just because I don't know, that's just how it works.
yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, my kids, when they would study for tests for school, they're always listening to music, or they would have videos playing in the background, and I'd always tell them, guys, when if you're connecting that information to what you're hearing, and when you go into your classroom, you're not going to be able to listen or watch those movies, so, like,
Right.
so that connection that you're making while you study is not going to be there when you take your test. So you need to be careful. And of course,
Right.
they didn't believe me until they actually went in and took the test.
Of course.
I know at my university, in the testings, they'd have a testing center where you go and take tests, and they had a room with music playing, and it was usually classical music. And I found if I studied to classical music and then went and took my test in the music room, I tended to perform better on the tests, which
Wow,
is
that's
interesting.
great. Yeah.
So, yeah. Um, and I think you just reach more people, like more readers, when you have the audiobooks, and it's a challenge to create them, but you're expanding your audience when you do that. So
Right.
for
Right.
sure. Yeah. So you have Blue Moon Rising is a Amazon Vela. So tell us more about that for people who may not be familiar with that.
Well, Amazon Vela it's a new platform, and the idea is to have short chapters, um, and I think they give you a number of them for free. I don't know what it is now. They've kind of changed that, and then they want you to pay a little bit for each subsequent chapter. So it's more of a serial type of format than just getting a book and reading it all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's I have Blue Moon Rising on there, and it's been on that platform for a few years. There tends to be a different audience, I think, for that. It's an audience that maybe is younger and more used to like reading on their phone, or that kind of experience. So it's
Mm-hmm.
been different. I'm not sure I want to continue it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Um, but and Amazon tends to try different things, um, different aspects of their business, and sometimes they close them down abruptly.
Yeah.
So I think it's better to be diversified. Yeah, but it's there's a lot of really unique stories there. There's a lot that romance, of course, is really big over there, but I've tended to go more toward fantasy um, in that. So I don't know. I mean, it's good. It's been a good experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy I did it. So.
I've never tried it. I I think maybe because as a reader, if I like a book, I don't want to have to wait. It's kind of like
Yeah.
the whole concept of Netflix releasing an entire season at once
Right.
and binging it rather than every week type thing. I it a lot of people, kids today, don't really understand that whole concept of we had to wait every week for the next episode to come out, and everyone would talk about it at
Right.
work because it was the thing to do on Tuesday night or whatever. Um, but when I'm reading, I want that next chapter. I want the book. So,
Totally. I mean, that's totally valid.
but I think you make a good point about Amazon as well. And other big companies, Google does the same thing where they will build a platform, they'll get people using it, and then suddenly they'll just announce, we're done,
Yeah.
it's closing down. Like podcasts. We had our podcast on Google Podcasts, and they just shut down Google Podcasts and migrated it over to YouTube. And it's
Yeah.
it's hard when especially if all your eggs are in that basket, and then suddenly it's gone.
Right. Right. Got to be flexible.
Right. Especially when you're an indie author and you're indie publishing, and you have to be able to keep up with the marketplace so people can find you, no matter
Right.
what those companies decide to do. Um,
Yeah.
it's we've talked a little bit about, there are platforms now where you can sell your ebooks directly without any big company. And then I know there are some companies working on audiobooks doing the same thing, where you don't have to go through Amazon or Barnes and Noble. You can sell it direct to your
Right.
readers. And we'll see how they go. I mean, it's hard to compete with Amazon. They're so big, but
Mm-hmm.
it'll be interesting to see how the market goes.
Yeah.
Um, so is there something, after having written multiple books and where you are now, that you wish you would have known when you started your indie author journey?
Um, yeah, I guess I wish I had been more accepting of myself and my voice and how I want to create. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's real easy to get sucked into, oh, it has to be this way. Um, and you're not going to get where you want to go unless you do it this way. And listening to all these experts,
Yeah.
having to do that. So, more attention on my own creativity and story. That's what I would. That's what I would like to do. But hindsight is 2020. It's not like that when
Right.
you're going through life, right? You just do the best you can do. I mean, that's how I look at it. So
Yeah.
it's an adventure. We're
Absolutely.
here. We're all here for such a short time, and why not make it into an adventure?
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. I love that way of looking at things. Um, if you were to, um, are there any other clean authors out there that you would recommend to our listeners as they're trying to build their library of clean books?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Um, I would say I don't have any names in particular, but I would say make the effort to kind of like maybe go on Facebook. They have clean groups. Take the
Mm-hmm.
time to read through and look for authors. It's not as I mean, it's a bit more challenging that way, but I think if you kind of get into that community a little more, um, it's more interaction amongst
Yeah.
readers, and you can find some wonderful authors that you never knew existed, that maybe are independent and small. And maybe have 20 books out there, and once you start you can go through them all. So
Right.
yeah, there's a little more than the big publishers and the ones on Amazon who have all the visibility. There's so much more behind that. So I would just encourage people to take the time to explore and see what you can find. Be open about that.
Yeah, as I've started to read more and more independent authors, there's just so many really good stories out there that I would have you're never going to hear of if you're just picking books off of the front table at the bookstore. You're
Exactly.
missing out on so many good stories and good books out there. So take a chance for sure.
Yeah.
And, and then I don't say that just because I want people to take a chance on my books or your books, but there are a lot of really talented authors and storytellers out there that you're never going to hear of unless you do a little bit of work and a
Yes.
little bit of research and go out and find them for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Because even the authors who are doing a lot of marketing, you know, it's so difficult, from this perspective, sitting in the author chair, it's so difficult to get just the word out there that, hello, I exist, I'm here. Um,
Right.
that I think, readers doing a little bit of work on their end, they'll be richly rewarded with books
I
they can
agree.
love and recommend. Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, it's time for us to get back to your two truths and a lie. So I'm going to remind everybody what they were, and then we'll take our guesses. So, number one, I once walked an ancient pilgrimage route for 500 kilometers. Number two, I have 7 children and 1 grandchild. And number three, my dream has been to have 2 wild donkeys as pets. Okay, Brock, what do you
All
think?
right. Well, I'm going to rule out number three because I think you gave us some hints initially, at least in my opinion. Your extensive knowledge about donkeys in Arizona, I feel like maybe you fulfilled that dream, and so and honestly, the other two, it's difficult. I'm just going to say number two, that maybe the numbers might be off a little bit. Maybe it's five
Okay,
kids
all
and
right.
4 grandkids or something like that. But I'm going to say that specifically 7 children and 1 grandchild is maybe the lie. That's off.
All
So
right. Well, then I I'm going to go with number one as the lie. That's a long walk. Maybe you've done a pilgrimage or you've been on a route, but not for, that's over 200 miles. That's a long trip. So I'm going to go with number one as the lie. So which one is it?
Okay. Well, 500 kilometers is a long trip, but that is the truth. There is
Ah,
an ancient pilgrimage route in Spain. Um, the idea was when you were in the Middle Ages, you go out your front door and you start walking. Some people to Rome, other people to the western coast of Spain, where there is, and that's where I went. There is a church there, and it is said to have the bones of Saint James. And so
oh,
people go there. They would maybe they were ill or they had an ill family member. They wanted to pray to heal that person. Maybe they got in trouble with the king, and the king said, "You go on a pilgrimage to to fix what you did wrong." Or maybe you were just devout and wanted to do that. And so it took me about a month to get there, and it's called
wow.
the Camino de Santiago. And so I walked, there's many routes, but I walked what's called the French way. And it's actually 750 kilometers, but time constraints, I had to skip a little bit of it. So wonderful, wonderful experience. I
I'll bet.
highly recommend
wow.
for anybody. Yeah, it's beautiful. The people are fantastic. You meet people from all over the world, and you know anybody. It's easy. It's not like climbing the Rocky Mountains or anything. It's easy in that you're on paths, and sometimes on the road. but the challenge is day after day after day
Right.
walking. So you have to learn to look at your body, pay attention to your body and what it can handle and what it can't.
Right.
And it's not always pleasant
Cool.
because that's the nature of a pilgrimage, but very
Right. Right.
much
That's the whole
worth it.
point.
So
Exactly.
yeah,
Fascinating.
yeah. Uh, you're not going to, some place where you sit around at the beach and drink margaritas all day. So yeah,
Right.
it's meaningful. Um,
All right.
number two is the one that is the lie. It's a bit of a lie. Let me say I have one child and 7 grandchildren.
Ah.
So
Reversed.
yes, it's a reverse thing. My daughter, she was a really good return on my investment. So I have lots of, and I'm blessed. I'm blessed by that. And
That's awesome.
Brock, you're absolutely right about my knowledge about donkeys, burros. I have 2 Jennies. That's female donkeys that were in the wild, and they have been gentled, meaning that they were afraid of people out in the wild. But a trainer kind of taught them, oh, people are nice. Here's some food. You can walk around here, put a halter on. And
Yeah.
people have been like, why do you like donkey? I don't know why I like them, but they're very wonderful animals. They're very, very sweet. And so I'm really happy to be able to have them and care for them and, I guess rescue them. They get to eat here. They don't always in the wild.
Yeah.
They get medical care here and everything. So
I've seen a few clips online that make me think that they can be kind of goofy too, like almost like a little bit like dogs at times or something, right? So kind of a funny, goofy
It'll be
personalities, at
fun.
least what it seemed, maybe more than horses. I don't know.
yeah. Well, and the noises they make are not all that serious,
Yeah,
because
right,
of
exactly.
the
They're hard
architecture
to
of.
take serious with that noise. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And my neighbors have heard lots of that, especially if if it's around feeding time and they see you, they're going to let you know that you need to get over there.
Love it.
Very cool. Well, that puts Brock, you're up to 10. I'm still at 5. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. It's my
All
very
right.
limited contribution to the podcast, right? So
Oh, I'm
I have my no, no. It's been great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. It's been a lot of fun, and I think it was a great conversation. So everyone, please check out Xina Ewell's books, and you can find them on Amazon, like she said, and check them out. Support her, and please subscribe, follow, and share the podcast with others who might be out there looking for clean books to read. So we appreciate it, and we will catch you next time on the Clean Library Podcast.